and welcome to GreenFleet Talks. My name's Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today. And I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Constable, Head of Business Development at Trojan Energy. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Kate. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
By way of introduction, Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Trojan?
Yeah, sure. So Trojan Energy is a relatively new company in terms of the EV market, but it's actually been going since 2016. It was founded by four engineering director leads from the North Sea offshore oil and gas industry, all of whom have got vast amounts of drilling, pipeline, and offshore operational experience. They effectively decided that they didn't want to be part of the kind of the polluting end of the industry, and they'd had an idea that that they had for a specific type of electric vehicle charging technology, interestingly, coming out of their experience of what they were doing in their jobs, and they effectively decided to take the plunge, and they've spent about three to 4 years developing that idea into something that is ready from a technology point of view and ready to be deployed. And I came on board in only May of this year because they needed someone to effectively run a business development function to kind of bring Trojan into the world. It's founded on the basis to allow everybody to benefit from the energy transition and not to disadvantage one group of people with solutions that benefit another. And you'll see that from some of the technology that we're trying to deploy. But yes, we're called Trojan Energy, not Trojan Charging, because the electric vehicle solution we have is just the first in a number of ideas, all that come out of the kind of the experiences that the engineering experiences the founders have had, and some of our future ideas and propositions won't be within vehicles; they'll be in other parts of the energy market. But we're focused very much on the vehicle charging challenge right now.
Great, and the hardware itself is quite unique in the market.
Yeah. So it's effectively a subterranean charge point, which is a cylinder that's effectively sunk into the ground so that the top of the cylinder is flat and flush to the pavement or roadway or whatever surface it's installed into. The user has effectively what we call the lance, but it's effectively a relatively short aluminium post with a Type 2 cable and connector attached, and the user inserts that post into the charge point, and the charge point can only be activated by one of our lances, and then the user can then plug the lance into their car in the normal way. When the charging is done, unlock the car, the lance unlocks at both ends, it can't be stolen, it can't be easily damaged, and then once the charging session stopped, the user takes their lance, puts it in their house or in the back of their car, and then there's effectively zero street clutter left behind. And so when we talk about Trojan wanting to not disadvantage one group of people, one of the big challenges of creating massive amounts of kind of roadside charging is the amount of street clutter that you generate. And lampposts are a very good solution for that, but not all lampposts are next to the curb. Some of them don't have the right power capabilities, and so we kind of fit in that niche where there's probably only this solution and a kind of a traditional on-street post. And a lot of local authorities don't really want to install 15 of those in a line, whereas we install 15 charge points at a time in one of our hubs.
So, I mean, I would say, gosh, I look forward to seeing one, but the chances are I have seen one and not realised.
Well, possibly. At the moment, we've got an Innovate UK funded project with a big support from the Office of Zero Emission Vehicles called the STEP Trial. That's a project consortium between ourselves, Octopus Energy, UK Power Networks, University of Leeds. It's led by Element Energy, very well-known, consultancy. They're the project managers. Birmingham City Council, Brent, and Camden are our local authority partners, and we've currently got 15 base units installed in a street in Brent, and we've got 5 charge points in operation. They're our first 5 charge points, and so we're effectively going through a kind of a very soft launch and ironing out the challenges and all the little niggles you get when you implement a new technology for the first time. I think it's fair to say that we've had quite a bit to do in terms of refining the customer experience, the sequencing of inserting the lance, pulling it out, the lights, the user messages, the software side, the control between the charge points and the feeder cabinet that we install nearby. But we've the charge points have only been up and running since the 23rd of July, and we've supplied almost a megawatt hour so far.
Wow.
And so one of the interesting things about our proposition is, because you need a proprietary device in order to access it, i.e. the lance, we sign up customers before we install the technology on their street. And so there's always a ready-made utilization kind of factor built in at the point of switch on, rather than just deploying technology and hoping people use it. So we're getting we've had more than kind of 50 individual charges over the course of the last kind of 40 odd days.
Great, it's great news. Well, today, Mark, you and I are discussing the growth of electric vehicles, and specifically what more needs to happen in the transition to mass market. So the latest figures from the SMMT show that battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids reached a 17% share of new vehicle registrations in July, which is great news, really positive, something I know neither you or I would have ever dreamed we would see. So what would you say are the main reasons for the sales of EVs picking up pace?
Okay, so I've kind of held this view for a while, and probably since we worked together at EDF all those years ago, is that in the early part of the market, it's only ever going to be about the product. So everything to do with the product, price, segment, brand, and availability. There's a lot of surveys that are done that when people are asked why haven't they got an EV, it cites worries about infrastructure, which are not unfounded, things around battery life, raw material sourcing, whether they will be able to kind of get a charge, how range, etc. But I mean, the fact remains is that every EV that comes into the UK is sold extremely quickly. There was a lead time issue with most EVs, up until about this time last year, and then there's been a kind of a bit of a switch when EV availability has effectively increased. But a lot of car buyers in the UK, I mean, it's a relatively conservative car buying kind of public, especially at the new car kind of end. A lot of people have brand loyalty, a lot of people have kind of segment loyalty, and a lot of people have a specific price point that they want to hit. And so the EV market still hasn't filled in very many of those gaps yet. There are some people who will remain a brand loyal, and until their brand brings out an EV, they're not going to get one. As soon as their brand brings out an EV, they'll consider it. Some people don't want an SUV, and a lot of new EVs are SUVs simply because that's an easier packaging challenge for the OEMs to be able to put the batteries in, etc. And SUVs are kind of very popular. I myself, I don't like SUVs, so I won't buy an EV, SUV, for example. And of course, price. We're now beginning to see a lot more models come on at kind of all the price points. One of the interesting things that's not talked about quite so much is the 50 kilowatt architecture that the PSA group have got with Peugeot, Citroën, and now Vauxhall models as well, because Vauxhall was effectively purchased by PSA,
which is now Stellantis.
Yes, of course. Yes, sorry, thank you. Yeah, sorry. It's always difficult to kind of keep up with the rebranding and the kind of the corporate activities. But that's a really great. I mean, when I was first driving around in EVs, my first EV, a BMW i3. I mean, it had like an 18 or 19 kilowatt hour battery, and here we are, less than kind of 5 years down the line from that, and the batteries of kind of 2.5 times the size at an affordable affordable level, especially if you lease. I mean, the kind of the leasing model as well for drivers who lease, but for drivers who won't consider an EV simply because the purchase cost is too high. Again, that's a product-led limitation, if you like. As soon as the purchase cost comes down, because they don't look at total cost of ownership, and regardless of how much you try and illustrate total cost of ownership, people, some people don't buy cars that way.
Right.
And so when the cost comes down, when Elon Musk talks about his $20,000 Tesla, Renault, Volkswagen, with the ID Life have just announced a €20,000 EV that's going to be available probably not until 2025, but that does show the kind of
Direction of travel.
yeah, exactly, and the intent. And I think all the interest is in the, I love a Porsche Taycan. I mean, look at my background as much as the next guy, but actually all the really exciting stuff is happening at the other end of the market, where vehicles like the Leaf and the Zoe have done the hard yards in kind of providing those good value for money, very, very good propositions.
Okay, so let's flip the conversation, because you've just touched on the importance of looking at whole life cost.
Yep.
There's whilst we can sit here and say, gosh, 17%, that's fantastic. The reality is there's still a long way to go before plug-in vehicle registrations dominate market share. So, we've still got a long way to go. And I look at the numbers and I think, well, why are so many businesses, 83% of all new vehicle registrations are still ICE? Why is that?
So I think there's a kind of a number of things. I think that there's still a lot of misinformation about in the marketplace, and it's, as probably we both know, it's very difficult to really get confidence on good quality EV buying and economic decisions unless you can really kind of immerse yourself and get under the skin. And if you're a business owner that can't devote the resource, either yourself if you're a small business owner, or somebody who kind of runs your fleet, or you've got a team of people who are kind of focused on other things, it still looks probably a little bit daunting. I mean, there is in kind of the business, the commercial vehicle model, I think that there's or market, I should say, there's a bit of a lag in terms of product as well. So it's only really in the last couple of years that really good quality kind of electric vehicle vans are being built at volume and kind of sold and deployed at volume. There's lots of companies in the preceding period who've led the way with a lot of conversions and a lot of kind of bespoke kind of builds, but the major OEM, again, most vans are sold by the major OEMs, and so it's those sort of solutions that are required. I mean, I think it's very, very telling that the new F-150 truck from Ford will probably come around and drive a kind of an organizational change within that OEM around thinking around electrification of larger vehicles, and that will probably feed through into light commercials around the rest of the world. I think there's also a big thing is the lease versus buy argument. I mean, a fleet manager is a relatively powerful person within an organization. They operate a large capital budget. Everyone wants to be their friend. Everyone wants them to provide them with a great car. And if somebody who becomes an EV fleet manager is more than likely going to become an opex budget holder rather than a capex budget holder, largely. And that's a cultural shift. And take EVs out of it, for example, I think that's that is a challenging thing that organizations will effectively come up against. I've always said the switch to EVs is a much bigger cultural problem than it is a technical one, and I think that's one of the manifestations of it. I mean, it's culturally difficult across all of us, every member of the public, every person who works in an organization in the UK, but I think that there is a lot of a lot of uncertainty around, the ability to be able to run the vehicles, and notwithstanding the fact that, as assets have been sweated, duty cycles become longer, and EVs, have to get, consequently even better than they were before in order to kind of close that gap. And I do think that the infra is a bigger challenge for business users, because there's a lot of in-day charging that's required, and I think that has a much bigger impact in the business market than the private one.
Let's have a look at that then. So just to kind of round up that Capex versus opex conversation, I suppose a really crucial point here is that no fleet that I've come across has literally overnight switched their entire fleet out from ICE to EV. There's a transition period. So, even if you've got a Capex-led organization up until now, they still have a period where they've got to run two different models. They've got to run still run the Capex for the ICE and then the opex for the EV. So it's just more work, isn't it? It's more admin. It's different, managing the same money in two different ways, which is not great. But you have touched on a lot of conversations when you're talking about switching to a plug-in vehicle. Focus on the EVs and the choice of vehicle, something that you've discussed, and there may be some discussion about the recharging equipment in terms of the hardware. So, but you and I both know that there's a lot more that needs to be taken into account. So, what other aspects do businesses need to consider before switching to EV?
So I think that there's definitely a driver engagement and education piece. I'm sort of thinking around some of the people that I've worked with in the past who were effectively field staff, and they have like a very deep relationship with their vehicle. They regard it as theirs rather than the organization's, and there's something to do in terms of providing good experiences and making sure that everybody in an organization who might end up with an EV has the opportunity to try one out, and drive and get to learn about them, even in a relatively light way. So there's a big kind of internal advocacy piece. There's a benefit and reward issue as well, if there's private usage of vehicles, and people might be relatively unfamiliar with the taxation. I mean, one of the things that's driving the GreenFleet kind of EV uptake is the incredibly advantageous benefit in kind. But I think what's for other types of vehicles with 100% kind of capital allowances and that kind of stuff, that's all still relatively unknown. And I think that for a lot of businesses, effectively you just look at the kind of the EV challenge, and as you say, it all just looks a bit too hard, and it all looks like you need to do too much research and do too much kind of fact finding and too much trialing in order to be able to just start on the journey. So I mean, I think that there are all of those factors. The way that the vehicles are effectively depoted is changing. A lot of fleets are now moving over to the home-based kind of driver kind of model, whereby the vehicle's taken home of an evening. And for a lot of people who don't have a driveway or already have their own car on their driveway, charging a vehicle overnight in that model is kind of challenging as well. And it's fair to say that we're thinking about that that market with our solution, where we can put a public charger directly outside someone's house and have it powered from their house. That's our kind of our doorstep piece. But there are other great projects going on around the market to kind of deal with that kind of challenge as well. So yeah, I mean, but all of these things are kind of people led. I think if you can develop the will, there are now technological solutions to vehicles, charging, usage, the roaming, the kind of the fleet kind of management. There's a lot of organisations who do charging cards for fleets where you can roam across lots of kind of infrastructure. But again, like I say, with local authorities, it's an entirely new category of stuff that people who deal with vehicles now have to kind of effectively learn. And so all of these challenges tend to be kind of people-led rather than trying to figure out technological answers. All of those technological answers are kind of there. You just have to either get them from somebody who's already got them and import them into your organization, or discover them for yourself.
I agree. I totally agree. So this is GreenFleet, and we often discuss what businesses need to do to reduce vehicle emissions.
Yeah.
But there is a role for local authorities to play. And what do you think they need to do to help maximise EV uptake in their areas?
So I think the local authorities have a bigger role to play than a lot of them realise at the moment, and so I think it's clear that there are some very, very well-known local authorities in the UK who are, publicly at the vanguard of EV adoption. You don't want to kind of embarrass anybody, but you think about the likes of Dundee and Nottingham, and Camden, who've done a massive amount of kind of EV promotion, who we're very proud to be Camden's partner. There's a lot of that stuff effectively comes from having an advocate in the right place within the local authority. And so again, picking up on the point that I said earlier, that it's an entirely new category of service, a lot of local authorities are still thinking about where kind of electric vehicle infrastructure and the council's response to it sits within the organisation. Does it sit within the parking team? Does it sit within an environment team? Does it fit within just a general kind of contracts and procurement team? And as we both know, the amount of kind of knowledge and immersion you have to get in order to get comfortable with the things that the levers you need to pull in order to be able to buy or use vehicles, deploy infrastructure. The kind of the standard council procurement officer approach to thinking about learn about EVs and try and create a partnership is not going to effectively provide too much benefit in the short term. Local authorities are obviously incredibly strapped for resources. They've got massive challenges on their time. I'm certainly not advocating the local authorities should simply just carve out an EV team, because that might not be within their gift. But it's the ones that have kind of found an advocate, and an advocate has kind of been at the right level within the organisation to build that stakeholder awareness and effectively drive it through. So when I was saying, I'm not going to name names, but when you think of Dundee and Nottingham, you think of individual people who are extremely well known within all the industry events and meetings that we've been to over the years for kind of pushing that that agenda, and that's effectively what it needs. I think it's very, very difficult to drive something from the very, very top down, because again, the amount of analysis is the council executive doesn't have time to do the analysis directly. That analysis and that discovery has got to be done by people with the the ability and the motive and the opportunity to actually start to do the market engagement and start to understand how it all kind of hangs together.
So, but where you have got a local authority where there is a dedicated resource that has that enthusiasm, that has that knowledge and that expertise to unlock funding, because that's absolutely critical, and the local authorities that you've referred to have been very successful in accessing funding. When you combine that with effectively a senior executive mandate to go do, then you've got a winning combination.
Absolutely.
So we need more of that. We need more people and more senior buy-in.
Yes, I mean the transport decarbonisation strategy has a local authority toolkit within it called out. There's not too much meat on those bones at the moment, but you know I'm relatively keen that Trojan and other market participants try and take a full role in the development of that toolkit for local authorities, so that we import lots and lots of case studies from all the great projects and all the great activity that's already happened, and also there's a little bit of kind of black box thinking that's required that people will have to be open about what's not gone so well, and that's going to be the more difficult thing, and repeating mistakes in one part of the country, repeating the bad outcomes I should say in one part of the country, is possible unless everyone gets to kind of share in all of those experiences. So yeah, that would be a key facility for local authorities to move their knowledge on, I think.
I think that actually sort of rounds up the conversation quite nicely, Mark, because we're not in trial phase anymore. We are in rollout, and the learnings from those trials need to be rolled out because this is an essential part of moving to mass market for electric vehicles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mark, it has been a pleasure talking to you.
It's always fantastic to catch up with you, Kate.
It's great to catch up. That is about all we've got time for. So thank you very much to Trojan Energy for joining GreenFleet Talks. And thank you for watching. Please tune in to GF365 again soon.